I'm Melissa Case from Hat to Hem, and today I'm going to tell you about my history with the American Girl dolls. Hopefully some of you will be able to relate to this, and if you can't, then hopefully you'll at least enjoy getting to know me a little bit better, as well as learning what is up with all the American Girl content that I've been posting lately. I also want to go on the record and say that I know I have a lot of American Girl dolls. This is a result of being an only child who didn't ask for that many things, and also proved at a fairly young age that even though these dolls will be played with a lot, I could still be trusted with some fairly expensive dolls. I like to view these less as a symbol of indulgence and more of a reminder of my parents' trust in me. Okay, on to the story. When I was 3 years old, yes, 3, my mom and I were looking at a children's magazine while waiting for my dentist appointment. At the end of the magazine, there was this full-page ad for Bitty Baby. They had different doll options, all displayed in footy pajamas with their Bitty Bears. I saw one doll in particular and I begged my mom for it, which was, believe it or not, unusual for me. She wanted to know why this doll in particular. I looked up at her and I said, "Mommy, she looks just like me." Until then, most of the baby dolls that I had seen or had all had blonde hair and blue eyes, and now suddenly there was this doll, this beautiful doll with dark hair and almond-shaped dark eyes like mine. I can still remember how much I wanted her. My parents got her for me later that year for my 4th birthday. I named her Baby Melissa because I was not super imaginative. Case in point, I had a whole series of hamsters growing up that were all named Furball. I am skillful but not creative. Anyway, I loved her so much. She was my favorite baby doll. She was played with all the time. She even came to Disney World with us the very first time we went. Now, since Bitty Baby was from Pleasant Company, we started getting the American Girl catalog. I was mesmerized. The catalog changed over the years, but I remember these full-page spread of dolls in their meet outfits, and then pages and pages for each doll showing the outfit and playset for each book. I had never seen anything like it. I'm not even sure I can confidently say I've seen anything like it since. They represented stories waiting to be discovered. They were set in the past, and that made them so sophisticated for a tiny 4-year-old. I could also tell from the ages 8 and up that these were special dolls that you needed to take care of. Over time, the catalog started focusing more and more on the modern line of dolls that they had. It's to the point where their more current magazines only have a total of 4 pages dedicated to their historical characters. Still, there was nothing like those early catalogs. And there was one doll that particularly drew me in. Samantha Parkington called to me. Everything from her pretty dresses to the style of her playsets drew me in more than any other doll, especially that 2-page birthday spread. It should be no surprise that eventually I would favor the aesthetics of the late 19th century, early 20th century, but I would never dream of asking for additional dresses or playsets. I already knew my numbers, and the numbers next to those playsets were higher than I could possibly imagine any toy costing. In reality, her incredibly fancy dress was $22. Those little petite floors along with all the other party treats were $26. The beautiful lemonade set that I coveted was $60. And the fancy wicker table and chairs was an astronomical $78. For contrast, the doll with the book was $82 and the accessories were $20, but in my head I thought having the doll itself was a better value than having the playset. I would have played with the playset just as much. And I probably would have saved my parents money in the long run if I just asked for just the lemonade set, or maybe like the lemonade set and the party treats, but kid logic. And although I would eventually get the modern Murphy bed, everything in the historical set just seemed too nice to actually own. Though I do want to say on the record that that Murphy bed was amazing and very thoughtfully designed. It had a closet, built-in vanity, and working lights. Plus, it was made out of wood, not plastic. Let me tell you, that thing was solid. But at that point, at 4 and then 5 years old, I never dreamed of owning more than the doll and her meat accessories. But I thought maybe if I was very, very good and I really took care of my things, I would someday get a Samantha doll when I was 8. To my surprise, I wouldn't have to wait that long. In either late 1998 or early 1999, when I was newly 6 and my cousin Kelly was just about to turn 5, she moved with her parents into a new house. Our parents encouraged us to explore, so eventually we ended up in Kelly's brand new room. We looked into her closet and there were 2 boxes with our names on them. My aunt had planned them there, hoping it would make the transition a little bit easier for Kelly and also add a little bit of fun in the moving process. Instead, Kelly and I thought the house was haunted and we ran from the room screaming. Anyway, in those boxes was a Kirsten doll for my cousin and a Samantha doll for me. We played with them all the time. We dressed them up in more modern 18-inch doll clothes that our parents were able to find for us, and they even went on vacation with us. Of all my American Girl dolls, Samantha is definitely the one who was played with the most. I didn't have another doll that I was really interested in until Josefina. I still remember when she was released. She was blown up across a 2-page spread, and she was so beautiful. When I was told I could choose another American Girl doll, I didn't think twice. After that, I received an American Girl doll every year for either my birthday in November or Christmas. I got Josefina when I was 9, Kaya when I was 10, Felicity when I was 11, Nellie when I was 12, Elizabeth when I was 13, and Molly at 14, just as I was starting to age out of the interest that would later come back full force in adulthood. My favorite year was the year I turned 13. It was the first time I got more than just a doll. The Felicity movie had just come out, so I got that, along with some of the clothes that had been released as a tie-in to the movie. I spent more time dressing these dolls than I had in years. This actually was an early hint of my future as a dressmaker because I would sit and study the clothes, trying to figure out how they were made. I most vividly remember studying Elizabeth's tea lesson dress and trying to see how the lace and apron were attached to it. Another favorite memory is when we went to visit the American Girl place in Chicago while we were visiting family. I chose Felicity to go with me on that one. We took the train from Michigan, and I remember watching my mom's flip phone to wait for the time change as we crossed over time zones. We had lunch in the cafe, we looked at everything, and we got to see the show Circle of Friends at their theater. I still remember all of the songs, and I'll post a link to the soundtrack in my description. Now, I could be wrong, but I think the only things I've got that day were the soundtrack, the program for the show, and a book that had the American Girl anthem. Again, link to that song in my description. That little book was also very loved. I listened to the song when I was working on this script, and I could remember the image in the book that went to which lyric, and I could still match the voice to the character on the Circle of Friends soundtrack. Now, their influence didn't stop just because I stopped playing with the dolls. Although the books I owned were limited to the dolls that I owned, and were also only the first in their series, I still read most of their books just from borrowing the books from the library. Whenever we were studying a new time period in history class, my mind would go right to whichever American Girl would have been alive during that time. It just made history come alive in a completely different way because I was able to see how various girls my age would have been living at that time, and it just added such a human element to the lesson. And the influence didn't stop just when I left the classroom, because nearly a decade after I got my last doll, I was on a date and I went on this huge rant about how the library that I was working in at the time should have had the dolls chronologically starting with Kaya instead of alphabetically starting with Addie, because I thought it was more likely that somebody would come in looking for the time period than looking for the actual character. And if they were looking for the actual character, they would have just enough background they probably would know where in the lineup they would be, so they would know to go to that section of the bookshelf. So it would make way more sense to have them all in chronological order rather than alphabetical. Now, I'm not saying that my passion on that particular subject was particularly appealing. However, later that night, my date, who ended up being my future husband, said he loved me for the first time. Coincidence? Probably. But I like to think he just really liked my passion. Now fast forward to 2021. My friend Marie asked me if I wanted to be a guest on her podcast, and then again to talk about the American Girl dolls. They were having their 35th anniversary, so all the original dolls were being re-released in their original dresses with their original books, and we decided to celebrate by talking about it for a little bit. Never did I ever expect to be on Spotify, yet there I am. I'll leave a link to that episode in the description below in case you haven't already had enough American Girl content. During this time, my husband was on his own mission. While we were at our favorite secondhand bookstore, he noticed that I was spending a lot of time looking at the American Girl books in the children's section. He suggested that we buy them, and at first I hesitated because I'm just like, oh, they're not something I actually need. But they were all $2 to $4, so we ended up buying them anyway. Then he made the mistake of asking how many I would need to complete the collection. The answer was a lot. That led to a conversation about how many dolls there were, 22 if you count the best friend dolls, and the differences in their covers. In case you don't know, there have been 6 different covers for the American Girl books, and my personal favorite was the second style. I liked it because unlike the first style, you had a little bit of illustration in the background, and each girl had their own colored spine. Plus, unlike the third style, they had a full-length character in a pose that matched the book formula instead of being a cropped photo or an illustration from the actual book. I loved the idea of the formula because I like being able to very easily compare the differences in the time periods just by looking at the covers. I figured if I was going to collect the books, I might as well try and collect the covers that I liked. That did complicate things a little bit though. Of the classic books, the second cover had the shortest run, lasting only 4 years, and that made them very difficult to find. But my husband likes that kind of challenge. After about a year, he managed to find all of the books that were released before the Be Forever run, including the short stories, travel scrapbooks, and world books. Then he went above and beyond and he got the cookbooks, craft books, theater kits, and paper towels, as well as some extra activity books. I didn't even know some of them existed. While helping him in his search, I found some doll-size sewing patterns for Samantha on eBay. That's how I ended up making her Christmas dress and her birthday dress. Digital copies of that pattern, as well as patterns for the other classic dolls, will be in my description below. While I was editing Samantha's surprise video, I had a marketing idea. I thought, what if I made a bracket of some of Samantha's classic outfits and let people vote on which one they liked best. I popped it up in my Instagram stories thinking I would have maybe 25 people voting. I had over 150. And then I had so many people ask if I was going to do more that I decided I would. I've been posting a bracket every week since the beginning of January, and it is now mid-June. In fact, this week I have all of the winners in one big bracket in an ultimate showdown to see which one would be the favorite American Girl dress. I have no idea who's going to win, but I am very excited to find out. Speaking of this week, I have one more thing that kind of brings the whole history full circle. Since Samantha finally had dresses that looked like the ones in the catalog, I realized there was one more thing to make my earliest American Girl dreams come true. After searching eBay, I was able to find her wicker table and chairs, the lemonade set, and the party treats from Samantha's birthday set. I can't believe that I get to look at this set in person now. It's just as beautiful as I dreamed it would be, and I feel just as lucky to have these as I did to have Samantha. So now, after 25 years, I have my Samantha doll, her birthday set, and most importantly, I have a baby that looks just like me. Thank you for joining me on this trip down memory lane. If you have your own history with the American Girl dolls, I would love to hear it in the comments. If you don't, I'd love to hear what you thought of this video. Did you have a favorite part of the story, or is there a particular doll you like? I want to hear from you. Thank you as always to my supportive patrons on Patreon. In case you don't know, I post project previews, early access to these videos, polls if I can't make a decision on a project, and more. So if you'd like, we'd love to have you join us. If not, no worries. I just hope I'll see you next time. Bye!